welcome to episode 99
of Mo Money,
the investing economics show for millennials by a millennial, where our goal is to educate, entertain, and increase the financial literacy of a whole new generation. I am, of course, the creator, the alpha, omega, the brains and beauty behind the show, MC Mo. Now let's get to the money. Last episode, when discussing the importance of the Federal Reserve's independence, I left a few cryptic messages by saying, that's a story for another time. But that is a story for another time. And the emails and messages, they just came flooding in by the thousands. Loads of messages. My inbox was full of, Mo, please tell us the story. Mo, please tell us what you're talking about. Mo, we need answers. So this episode, I'm going to talk to you about the Federal Reserve independence again, and why in reality, that independence is pretty much a myth. Last week, the Federal Reserve cut the federal funds rate for the first time since 2008. It was a small 0.25% cut, but with an economy and a stock market that has done nothing but grow for the past 10 years, why would they cut now? Federal Reserve says it was to ensure that there would be no chance of recession. But during Federal Reserve Chairman Powell's press conference, he seemed unable to give a clear answer to what the reason was. He was unable to give a clear answer if this was the last cut they would do for this year, or if they would perhaps raise rates next time instead. What did seem clear is the Federal Reserve was bending to the political pressure of President Trump. Trump has been tweeting and temper-trumping about the Federal Reserve for months, telling them to stop quantitative tightening, to cut the federal funds rate. If they cut rates by 0.5 point, our economy would be a rocket ship, he famously said. Well, they cut by 0.25 point, and all Trump could say was, wow, Powell has let us down again, and the Fed is not helping me at all. Like, could you imagine? Fuck you, dude. I just cut rates and you're still not happy enough. And just today, Trump attacked them again and called on them to cut rates bigger and faster to help the economy compete internationally. I've been trying to write this script for over a week, and each day something new happens. Also this week, former Fed chairs Volcker, Bernanke, and Yellen wrote and signed an open letter urging for the Federal Reserve to be left alone and allow them to be restored to their full independence. So as you can see, this is kind of a hot topic right now. The thing is, since 1913, the year the Federal Reserve was founded, they've never been truly independent. During World War I, Congress pressured the Fed into buying war bonds to finance the fight, which led to a spike in inflation. During the Great Depression, with the Gold Standard Act of 1934, FDR managed to kind of sidestep the Federal Reserve and control the nation's monetary policy. And again in 1940, the Federal Reserve was expected to start buying government bonds to support the nation in World War II. It wasn't until the Treasury Fed Accord of 1951 that the monetary policy was again returned to the Federal Reserve, but that was short-lived. The pressure, both direct and indirect, on Fed Chair Arthur Burns by Richard Nixon to create an easy money environment so he would be reelected was shown clearly in recordings of conversations between the two men. Paul Volcker and Alan Greenspan managed to keep themselves somewhat independent, but Ben Bernanke opened the checkbook to save private companies for Bush and Obama during the financial crisis, which many saw as a sacrifice of their independence. Trump claimed during the election that the Fed was keeping rates low in order to make Obama look good and to help Hillary win the election. With all that said, the Federal Reserve is a government agency, so they are going to be faced with political pressures. They may be able to make monetary policy independently without approval of Congress, but Congress always holds the right to adjust the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and restrict or expand the powers of the Fed if they are unhappy with them. So the Fed can run around and thumb their noses at Congress, but all Congress has to do is wave the Federal Reserve Act in one hand and the pen in the other to strike fear into the Fed and make them kind of fall in line. Sarah Binder and Mark Spindell do a good job in their book, The Myth of Fed Independence, explaining how when times are good, the Fed has independence because Congress isn't paying attention to them. But when times are bad, Congress turns their attention to the Fed and uses them as a punching bag for their failures. This chart here shows clearly when times are bad, legislation against the Fed increases from both sides of the aisle as well. The Fed knows it has to appease the political powers that be enough to keep their independence, but if they have to do that, then they're not very independent at all. Basically, being in the Federal Reserve is a thankless job. When the economy is doing well, nobody is applauding the Fed, they're all applauding the president. But when the economy is doing badly, according to this chart here, Either A, people know to blame the Fed, or B, politicians successfully scapegoat the Fed time and time again. Just like Trump is doing now. The economy is amazing. It'd be better if I had the Fed's help, though. It's like in The Godfather when Sonny Corleone is begging Tom Hagen to help him win the war with the Italians. No more advice on how to patch things up. Just help me win. Bottom line, the Federal Reserve is made up of unelected officials tasked with one of the most important roles, creating monetary policy that creates a stable economy. So in that way, it's not political. They don't make campaign promises that they have to fulfill. They have a task given to them by the Federal Reserve Act, and that's it. A lot of them have Wall Street ties, so is it independence from the rest of the government that we should be worried about, or is it rather their ability to be independent from what Wall Street wants? The Fed has shown recently when the stock market stumbles, they back off and try to accommodate the markets. And the way the Fed came to the rescue in 2008 about says it all. Anyways, some people don't like these elite, smarter than everybody economists having all this power since they weren't elected by the people. But if they were elected by the people, they'd have to campaign on things that people wanted, which is loose monetary policy, easy money, low interest rates. But that could quickly lead to inflation and hyperinflation. It is proven central banks with more independence have much less inflation, which is very important for a stable economy. It's easier for the Fed to enact monetary policy when they have the government support. So you could say the Fed has to eat their vegetables to make their parents happy, but having the Congress and the president setting monetary policy is a recipe for disaster. The libertarian in me would say, end the Fed. That way you don't have to worry about it being independent or not. Let the markets decide interest rates on their own. But the other side of me says, well, if the Federal Reserve must exist, it should be free of all political pressures in order to best complete their mandates. End of the day, money is power. And the Fed's entire job is money. So of course you're going to have presidents and politicians who are trying to pressure the Fed into enacting policies that enrich their interests. Thank you so much for watching another episode. You can find new and classic episodes right here on YouTube. For now, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, like me on Facebook. Mo Money, signing out.